Welcome to Stranger Species, Episode 3. I'm Mike Davis, here with my lovely wife, Ethne Davis.
Howdy ho.
Howdy ho. Welcome. It's hard to believe it's Episode 3 already.
Already.
I know. We got so much to talk about. How you doing today?
Good. How's everyone out there doing?
I have no idea,
Well,
but hopefully all right.
hopefully so.
Cool. What do you want to talk about today?
Well, what I want to talk about versus what we are talking about, I have no idea, but I don't want to talk about anything too scary.
No scary stuff, I don't think. What do you want to talk about?
Obviously something strange about the human species.
Okay, well, good. We can do that. I do not believe it is scary. Of course, our definitions of scary are extremely different, but I don't think it is scary at all. I will tell you something that is kind of scary. In our kitchen, we have an Alexa. I don't know what kind it is, but the one with the screen.
An Alexa Home.
Home, there you go. Ever since our episode last week on artificial intelligence, it's constantly asking me, do you want to talk to this chatbot? Do you want to try this artificial intelligence?
Are you serious?
Yeah. Maybe it's a coincidence, but it's like happened 3 different times with like 3 different
Luckily,
things.
I haven't been home for that.
Yeah.
Because, again,
And there's not like an Alexa in this room or anything.
No, there's definitely not an Alexa in our recording room.
Yeah.
Not much of anything in here.
No, that's true. So, I don't know what's up with that, but
creepy.
Yeah, that is a little weird.
All right. So what are we talking about today, Mr. Mike?
Oh, today we're going to talk about, well, I just actually, before we start, I wanted to say it was kind of cool. I want to thank everyone who is listening. I can go on and I can look at stats from all sorts of cool things, where people are listening, what devices, what platform, like Apple, Spotify, all that kind of stuff. And it's really fun. You can look at locations of where people are listening. And it's fun because we're out of Spokane, Washington. There's a lot of Spokane people, obviously, that listen because they know us, we're around here. But it's fun because you see all these little 1 or 2 episodes popping up in, San Francisco,
Chicago. I remember
Chicago, Kansas City. There's quite a few in the Seattle area, which is in the same state, but I mean, it's 4.5 hours from here. And I'm sure we probably know people, but I don't know of anybody that I know in San Francisco or Chicago who would be listening. So it's fun to kind of see.
Who is listening?
Yeah, just knew it's, slowly, well, not slowly, it's pretty quickly, popping up in different areas. But it's fun to see every time I go on, like, oh, there's a new one in some random city. So that is cool. So thank you for all those who are listening. If you do enjoy it, please do give it a 5-star review on whatever platform you are on and tell your friends. Spread the word. We're having a lot of fun. So today we are going to talk about outer space.
Okay. I like it.
Yeah. Now we're going to talk about some people who maybe have been lost in outer space.
Okay.
Yeah. Pretty exciting stuff.
Like humans.
Humans.
Okay.
Who are drifting aimlessly forever into the void of nothing that is the universe.
Okay. It has nothing to do with Starlink or anything?
Nope.
Okay. Remember that concert we were at? That weird. Was that Starlink?
It wasn't Starlink, but it was SpaceX satellites.
I don't know.
So we were last year. Okay. Side note. Sorry. If you're not familiar with the state of Washington, there is an amazing amphitheater. It's called The Gorge. If you're a Dave Matthews fan, he goes every Labor Day. He's got a bunch of live albums from there. But it's a big. It's like Red Rock or I'm trying to think what other big amphitheaters there are. But
I mean, it's gorgeous.
It is gorgeous. It is in the middle of absolutely nowhere. It sits on the Columbia River, and it is breathtaking. We went last year to see Jack Johnson and Ben Harper. Amazing show. In the middle of Jack Johnson's set, up in the sky, this crazy, almost like a conveyor belt of
lights,
perfectly aligned. Maybe 10 of them or so?
Yeah, but it kept like Yeah, like conveyor belting. Like
Yeah.
one would disappear and another one would show up on the other end. And
I mean, it really looked like a giant UFO.
yeah, the whole crowd
in.
was
And no one was
recording.
listening.
No one
Yeah.
was listening to Jack. I felt bad for a minute, but
It was
we
really
did some
bizarre.
research, and actually, Black Horse,
Dark Horse.
Dark Horse, I'm sorry.
Brett Weinstein.
He had posted about it because they
Yeah.
were in Seattle.
Yeah.
And he
that's
had
right.
said, and so that's how we found out what it was we
I
were
believe it
looking
was
at.
SpaceX satellites
Yeah.
or something like that. But it was trippy.
Yeah, it was related to, what's his name?
Elon.
Elon Musk. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Anyways.
It was cool.
That was cool.
Okay, so outer space. Sorry,
outer
focus.
space.
Let's focus here.
Yeah. So we're going to go back to the 60s, 1950s and 1960s. And we're talking a little about the space race. You've probably heard that term before. So at the end of World War II, the Cold War began between the United States and the Soviet Union. Essentially, who could build the bigger, better nuclear bomb? And it was this race back and forth, you know. We've got a bigger one. No, we've got a bigger one. We can blow you up. No, we can blow you up. And
the definition of the Cold War in a nutshell right there.
that was super scientific.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I am a biology guy, not a history.
It's okay. I liked it. It was good for us layman people.
Well, everything's going to be that way because I don't ever know what I'm talking about.
Oh, okay. Perfect.
But part of that was a race to conquer outer space. You have to realize at this time, there's nothing up there, man-made wise. You know, for us, it's very easy to see satellites and, you know, been to the moon and talking about going to Mars. And, you know, there's private people who can pay enough money to go into outer space and all this craziness. But back in the mid-50s, I mean, it never happened. Nothing had ever been launched into space before, unless you're like an ancient aliens person and you believe in that kind of stuff. But to our knowledge, nothing had ever been launched there. And so there became this race between the United States and the Soviet Union and who could dominate outer space. And so at the end of the Second World War, we actually, the United States, recruited 100 or so former Nazi rocket scientists. And that whole thing was called Operation Paperclip. Totally another story, side story.
You can look it up.
You can totally look it up. Super fascinating. Maybe we'll do an episode on it one day. But we had all these guys. So in 1955, the United States announced it had plans to launch the first artificial satellite into space. And 4 days later, guess what the Soviet Union decided they were going to do?
The same thing.
That's right.
Dun, 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 dun.
They too decided, okay, well, great. We're going to launch one into space too then. And so that kind of kicked off the official space race. 2 years later, in 1957, the Soviet Union won the first leg of that race and launched Sputnik 1 into space, which was the first satellite ever launched into space. If that makes sense. A lot of space talk. Just a few years later, they on April 12th, 1961, the Soviets also launched the first person into space, Yuri Gagarin, on Vostok 1. And then about 5 weeks later, President Kennedy decided that was enough, and he asked Congress to commit enough money and enough manpower to land someone on the moon before the end of the decade, because he was sick of losing to the Soviets. So at that point, it became kind of the whole space just got kicked up to another level. Okay, now we've got to build these big, super heavy systems that can launch both people, but also, you know, some kind of device for landing on the moon, a rover or a spaceship that can, you know, I don't even know how they got off the moon after they landed on the moon.
If they landed on the moon.
Yeah.
I like to throw in my little tidbits here.
I don't know.
I mean, that's a great question.
I mean, I'm sure it's very easy to find out, but I don't know. But whatever they used to get back off the moon, they needed something big enough to shoot all that up into space. So both countries began doing this. So, the U.S. designed the Saturn V rocket, which would eventually propel the crew of Apollo 11 to the moon in 1969. Cool side note, interesting side note. The Saturn V rocket was made and designed by Wernher von Braun. That's a cool name.
Sounds, European.
So he was German. He was
I was gonna
he
say
was a
German.
Nazi.
Yeah.
He was an SS soldier. He was the head of the V2 rocket system in Germany, the Nazi rocket program. He was one of these guys in Operation Paperclip that came over the United States and eventually became one of the heads of NASA. So it's kind of funny. Like, okay, if you are a Nazi war criminal with that doesn't have a cool, skill that we can use, then we're going to hang you. But if you have a cool skill we can use, then we're going to give you a pension and a house and sign you up to work for the government.
And a good job. Yeah. And a good job.
Granted, I don't think Wernher von Braun really was a Nazi in that sense.
Right. He didn't follow the ideals.
Right. He was already the head of a rocket program when World War II took off. And essentially they were like, okay, now you're part of this. And it was either walk away from everything. But he wasn't like involved in concentration camps and all that kind of stuff. But he did design these big, giant rocket programs for the war efforts. But it's just interesting how in time he becomes essentially the head of NASA. Maybe not the head of NASA, but one of the key figures.
A bigwig.
That got the Americans on the moon. I mean, he designed that system. But that's not what we're here to talk about. What we're here to talk about is the Soviet side of trying to get to the moon. And along come two Italian brothers, Achille and Giovanni Cordiglia.
Very nice accent.
Thank you. I feel like you have to say it like that. Achille and Giovanni. I don't know if that's right.
But,
Cordiglia.
But they're from Italy, not the Soviet.
Yeah,
okay.
Correct. So they are two brothers in the 1950s. They were amateur radio operators. They found an old German bunker in Italy because Italy was part of the German side.
Mm-hmm.
And I can just imagine like finding this old kind of decrepit bunker that still has stuff in it, and kind of Jimmy rigging your own stuff. And supposedly they got these radios up and working, and they could spy in on both Soviet and American recordings of launches
from the past that had already happened.
No,
that
live.
Were currently happening. Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so it's Monday and the Soviets are shooting a rocket off, and they're sitting in their bunker listening to the communications of
that procedure. Okay, cool.
Or you always hear, Houston, we have a problem. And Houston's talking to the Apollo program.
Yeah.
Those kind of communications that they're tapping into and listening to.
Interesting.
Yeah,
it's quite the discovery.
I know.
What year did they discover this? Do we know?
Well, this is in the
70s,
the mid 50s.
Mid 50s that they found this radio. Okay,
that's actually a really good question. So we're talking mid 50s. 1961 is when Russia or the Soviet Union first puts someone into space.
The other guy you already mentioned, yeah.
Yeah, Yuri Gagarin. And it isn't until...
I thought you said 1969?
No, it's 1969, I believe, that we actually get to the moon.
Oh, okay. So
this is before any satellites or anything are being launched into space. That they're starting to hear about these things or to tap in and listen to them. So they claim to have multiple recordings of failed Soviet
launches.
Well, not failed launches, failed recovery of launches. How about that? People who got to outer space
but never got back.
And so,
but they know that they successfully got to space?
Well,
Like according to the radio.
right.
Interesting.
Because
Okay.
they can hear them talking.
Whoa.
And then all of a sudden, various things happen that that don't. So I believe there were 9 recordings that they said they had. The first one, now some of them, I don't know even how they would work. Like the things they're saying are happening. I'm not, again, smart enough to understand. But the first one in 1960, this is a year before Yuri Gagarin goes into space. They claim that they have audio of a manned spacecraft going off course. Whatever that means. So they're saying a year before, history tells us someone was in space. Someone else was in space, but got lost.
But they obviously didn't tell anybody about this until much later.
That's good. We'll get to that.
Oh, okay. Okay.
You are right. They released most of these at a later time, I believe.
Well,
but we'll get
I
there.
can't imagine that they would allow them to stay there and keep listening to this if they knew about it.
Well, that's a good point.
Right.
If
So
they're telling everybody.
yeah, I think it probably would be smarter for them to not say anything. At least that's what my brain says. But
Yeah. Makes sense.
I'm not Italian, so
No, you're not. You're Canadian.
that I'm dual.
Well, that's true.
I'm dual,
now.
actually.
Yeah. So November 28th, 1960. So still before we have any official people in space, they claim that they capture a faint SOS Morse code signal that's being sent from a troubled spacecraft, and it's just getting softer and softer and softer.
Like they're
as the
going out
spacecraft.
further and further and further.
Right.
Whoa.
Which seems like a very interesting way to go to me. If you're going to die, drifting aimlessly, seems like it'd be really pretty.
I mean, I imagine, yeah, it would be very peaceful. But I wonder what you are going to be dying from, right?
They're
Like,
also in a 1960s.
yeah,
like,
terrifying. Is it going to
chunk of metal.
implode? Is it going to implode? Are you going to explode? Are you going to suffocate? Are you going to freeze? I mean, what's going to happen first? I mean, I don't know.
I don't know.
Brave
The guy
people.
he didn't radio that part in.
He just kept saying SOS.
Yeah.
SOS.
Well, it was a Morse code, so it was like beep, beep,
Right.
beep, beep. Yeah.
I got that part. I don't know the Morse code SOS though.
So, February 1961, they claim that a cosmonaut is audibly recorded suffocating to death.
Oh, sounds terrible.
Yeah, I don't want to hear that one.
Yeah, no.
May 1961, an orbiting spacecraft makes an appeal for help after going out of control, losing control of his spacecraft. Another one in 1961, where a cosmonaut loses control of the spacecraft and veers off into deep space.
So, I mean, the Soviet Union just doesn't really care about how many people they send up into outer space
Well,
with failed attempts, or what does that look like? You just keep doing it?
maybe. I mean, officially, none of this has been confirmed, right? So,
Okay, so these Italians are claiming this, but Russia, or I mean, I guess at this time the Soviet Union hasn't owned this.
right, they're not coming out and saying, "Oh, yeah, that's right, that was us. We sent that guy up, and then he never came back."
So they only claim Yurik. Is that the guy's name? Or Yuri? Or
Yuri, yeah.
Yuri. They only claim him because it was successful and he returned.
Well, I mean, you can make that argument.
Okay, I'm just trying to, yeah.
Yeah, but they definitely claim that for sure.
But he did return successfully.
He did.
Okay.
He did. He orbited the Earth one time in
That's cool.
1 hour and 29 minutes.
That's fast.
I know.
And he lived?
He lived.
Did he see? I mean,
Everything, I would assume.
but if you're going that fast,
Well, we're all spinning super fast right now.
yeah. But we're on the thing
Yeah,
that is.
I know, physics. Yeah,
Okay. yeah.
mind-boggling.
Okay, let's keep going.
So, I lost my train of thought. That's no fun.
Oh, you were just saying, all these people keep going up. So far, they're not officially claimed.
Right. So, we don't know. Obviously, yeah, they're not claiming or admitting to anything. What I was going to say, the Soviet Union / Russia is well documented, like looking at World War I, World War II, their attempt to win a lot of things is let's just throw a bunch of bodies at it
and see
what happens.
Yeah.
And so would it be any different for the space race? I mean, I very well could see that being true, but there's no reason why the Americans wouldn't potentially be doing the same thing.
And maybe they are. So
right.
These Italians that found this bunker said that they can tap into U.S. radio too, right?
They do say that, but I have no...
they didn't actually...
I have nothing about theirs.
Oh.
No claims of...
Interesting. Okay.
Lost astronauts. Cosmonaut's is a better word than astronaut.
Maybe they got paid to, keep their mouth quiet.
Maybe.
By the United States.
Maybe. But then we do have a couple that are after this first space launch of Yuri Gagarin. So 1962, a space capsule misjudges its re-entry and bounces off the Earth's atmosphere before being flung into outer space. Now, physics, I don't understand how that would work.
You bounce off the Earth's atmosphere?
Because the atmosphere isn't like a thing like that. But yeah, maybe just bing, flying off the other direction. Like a spit wad.
Yeah, I definitely don't know enough about any of this to say anything. So,
yeah,
sounds interesting.
But the most interesting one is from 1963, a female cosmonaut that dies during reentry essentially burns up coming into the atmosphere.
But what's so interesting about her?
I'm going to let you listen to it.
Oh, okay.
Potentially.
Okay. Let's see if this works.
Yeah.
Love steak.
Nope. So her story, as I'm pulling this up, supposedly coming back into the atmosphere, she starts calling for help. Saying, hey, it's getting really hot in here. I'm losing control. Am I going to crash? It's getting hot. And then ultimately they lose her is the story here. So let's see if I can find it. I'm sorry. Well, so that is where she is at. Trying to see the timestamp here. Okay, there we go. Sorry, everybody. So I will have it right here. Let's see how this listens.
Translation to the message reveals alarming content. Quote, listen.
So, I obviously don't speak Russian, but you get a little glimpse of kind of what they were hearing, and how it sounded. So translation there says, listen, come in. I'm hot. Isn't this dangerous? I'm hot. Am I going to crash? Yes. So 3 days later, the brothers actually released this audio. And the Soviet Union then released a statement saying that, yes, a satellite had burned up upon reentry, but denied any people were on it, that it was a manned craft. Just saying it was a satellite that came in and it burned up on reentry.
And so the person speaking was someone watching it come in and thinking it was going to burn?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. All right. So that's how they covered it up?
That's what they said.
Okay.
So, just begs the question, what was the price ultimately that, both sides paid to try to win the space race? There's big historic landmarks that are well heralded of success, like Yuri Gagarin getting to space or Apollo 11 getting to the moon. But how many other people were really potentially lost in trying to get that have been covered up?
Well, and I guess I think it's funny that Okay, so they got to the moon. Nothing has happened since then,
It is strange.
right? I mean, yeah, that's strange.
It is strange.
And so I always think about, I mean, they're definitely doing stuff in space, but the whole space race, it's like it died. It's like it just, if you can get one person to space and to the moon, why wouldn't you try to then get this or try to get that? I mean, that's sort of how it works. And it just kind of died.
Yeah, it did die. I mean, yeah, no, you're right. It did. You could go lots of different ways with that, but it is fascinating how,
Right.
okay, well, we haven't been back and no one else has been there. So,
okay.
yeah, that was fun. Check that off our bucket list
Right.
of things to do. So the question is, were any of these recordings real? That's the question. And after their second recording was released, the brothers were picked up by a Swiss-Italian radio station and became their resident space experts.
Oh.
I don't know if they ever got compensated for this. This is a gig that they got paid for, but they obviously got something in return for. So this was after their second, and then there were 7 more. So was this just a sweet, like, oh, this is fun, like we're getting some attention? Or were they really getting these things, and so they were space experts? I don't know. But another thought was, did the Soviets, when they started doing their recordings, this is in the mid-50s, and their first ones were 1960, the first recordings that they claimed to have. And the question then is, did the Soviets even have the right technology to get someone lost deep in space in 1960?
Well, I'm not even smart enough, I think, or even well educated enough in this specific aspect. Like, what's considered deep space?
Oh my goodness, that's such a great question.
Because, I mean, to have the technology, I mean, is the moon considered deep space?
Yes.
Okay.
In this conversation, yes.
Yes. Okay. So it's a distance. Like
kind of.
Okay. Are you going to answer this question?
Yeah, actually, we are going to get right into that.
Okay.
But it's super wishy-washy gray. Yeah.
Oh.
I mean,
well,
there isn't a...
So NASA, like there's not an official NASA definition for deep space.
There is, but it is completely arbitrary.
Perfect.
Yeah. So
I love space.
Yeah, it's a big vacuum.
It's true.
Hard to define.
Right.
So the earliest Soviet missions were all part of what was called the Vostok 3KA shuttle program. So when we're talking about Sputnik and those early satellites in the early 60s, they're all part of this program, which totally lacked any kind of secondary propulsion needed to break into deep space. So obviously the gravity, Earth's pulling on you. These rockets are super heavy. So trying to get past that gravitational pull is a major pain in the butt. And so the early things didn't have enough, like I said, secondary propulsion to take these heavy payloads out past the atmosphere and gravity's pull. So to answer your question, and this is where we're going to get a little nerdy, a little physicsy, hopefully keep this really straightforward. So the atmosphere is not a single thing. Like in movies, it always is just like this. Oh, we're flying, it's blue skies, and poof, oh, now it's black and stars, and we're in outer space. Like Mandalorian's flying the ship, and just all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm out of outer space, I'm into the clouds, I'm through the atmosphere. In reality, it's this gradient of literally hundreds of kilometers of gases. And it's not till you're through all of that you're actually in like outer space, quote unquote. So there is an imaginary line, this arbitrary line, like you asked this question, does NASA have this thing? There is a thing, it's called the Kármán line. The Kármán line sits at 100 kilometers up.
From the Earth.
From the Earth.
Makes me think of Carmen Sandiego.
Now, obviously, to me at least, this is an absolutely worthless number because I don't know what's 100 kilometers up. Is it cloud? How high up's a cloud? How high up's a star? How high? It all looks the same, right?
Sure, but I think the definition is if they get past 100 kilometers, that's considered deep space.
Kind of.
Okay.
So a plane flies at about 6 to 20 kilometers up.
That's it?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but I thought it was way more
I know.
than that.
You're like, oh, I'm almost as high as in the sky. No,
Yeah.
you're not very high at all.
Oh.
Yuri, when he had his launch and orbited
The Earth. Mm-hmm.
he was at 301 kilometers.
Oh, so that is considered deep space.
Over
Or
the Kármán line,
It's
yes.
past the Kármán line.
But he's still in orbit of the Earth. He's not drifting off into no man's land.
Oh, I see.
Like he's still under
Mhm.
control of the Earth's gravitational pull.
Very interesting. So who came up with this 100-kilometer line? Like where does the Kármán line?
That would be Mr. Kármán.
I mean, obviously. Yeah. Or Carmen Sandiego.
Spelled differently, but yeah, maybe it was Carmen Sandiego.
How do you spell this, Carmen?
Karman.
Oh, it's a K. Okay.
Yeah. The International Space System sits at 408 kilometers. See, I would consider that space. Like, you're in
But
the
would
International
you
Space
consider
System.
that deep space?
Apparently not.
Well, okay.
So I guess the point is this. If the ISS, the International Space System station, is sitting at 408 kilometers, it's still not being untethered and then just floating off into
deep space.
into nothing.
So what you're trying to say is to be floating off into La La Land, let's say. You have to be at least further than we know for sure 408 kilometers from the Earth.
Right.
I mean, essentially, that's all we know. That's the furthest that we know of anything that's
It's
gone.
the furthest that I wrote down. So there you go.
Okay. So
going back.
So then the technology
to
be
you
able
have
to
enough
sustain. Right.
technology to shoot a person past that? Or were they magically like, oh no, I accidentally turned left instead of right and I'm veering off into outer space forever and ever now? Like, well, how'd you even get up there in 1959 or 1960?
Well, maybe up there isn't really that far. Like, I guess I don't understand physics enough to really delve into this conversation enough, but can you still just kind of be floating up there even if you are subject to the Earth's pulls in different ways? Like, can you still have no control, but still be like...
Well, I would definitely assume you could have a lack of control based on 1960 spaceship rocket technology. Probably wasn't great.
Right. So then maybe they were still lost in space, but they aren't
floating off forever.
Yeah, floating off forever. They just eventually just... Well, I would assume with the old school technology, they're going to, like I said, implode, explode, disintegrate. I mean...
That's true.
I think
maybe there's part of all the space junk up there.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know.
Let's give that. I have no idea either. But it wasn't until the late 60s that the United States had big enough rockets to officially launch, to the moon.
And how far away, forgive my ignorance, I don't remember, is the moon from here?
Far.
Like...
I don't know what it is.
1,000?
I don't know.
Okay.
We could look it up.
No, I know we could. It's just like, it's a curiosity thing. Like, oh, so they quote unquote made it to the moon. I still just quote unquote it.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know how far it is. You could Google it, find it in 2 seconds. And it wasn't even until 1974 that officially the Soviets had the technology to get to the moon with an actual manned mission. Not that they did, but that they had the secondary propulsions and stuff to launch that big of a spacecraft that far.
So is the strange component the fact that they heard these radio things, or is the strange component like the fact that they would just keep launching potentially more of them up there without who knows what's happening to them?
I think all of it's strange. Like there's lots of different stories here. story one is, are there really all these lost cosmonauts who have been shot into outer space? And then, okay, well, that didn't work.
Are they frozen in time? Just kind of up there, like you said. They've become part of the junk up there?
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah.
Is that a real story? I don't know. It definitely wouldn't put it past the Soviet Union to do that.
I wouldn't put it past him as far as the ethical reasons of sending up someone, just based on all of the historical information. But I feel like it's an expensive thing, right? So I would question like the haphazardness of sending and the cost that each one of those would take. But I guess maybe that's just me. I'm like very...
Yeah, but it's like your number one goal for 40 years.
I guess. And if you're kind of competing against the United States, then you just don't care how much it costs.
All right.
You just want to be the
and
first.
And the Soviet Union's super, super industrialized.
Right. You just want to be the first to be able to say you've done it. So it doesn't...
Well, you also want to have the upper hand with the rocketry technology.
Oh, for sure. Like it comes with a sense of power.
Yeah.
Yeah. I get that part. Yeah. So maybe then.
But on the flip side, it very well could be totally bogus. And you have these two brothers who are just making all this crap up.
For kicks and giggles?
Notoriety,
to get famous.
I mean, who knows why.
Has anyone ever followed up or checked any validity of?
I tried finding like interviews with them and stuff. Giovanni's dead. He died not too long ago. Achilles still alive. He's actually a cardiologist now.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, not now. He's retired now, but
interesting.
He became a cardiologist. So yeah, I mean, they lived long lives. But I couldn't find anything super easily. Like, oh, here's an interview. 25 years later.
Interesting.
So it just raises lots of questions. Could you actually lose an astronaut in outer space if your tech wasn't there to propel them for another 10 years? But then you have to look at the other side of that. Well, is the tech really there and you're just covering up the tech? I mean, I'm sure the U.S. military has all sorts of crazy stuff that's way more advanced than anything that we
are aware of.
Right.
Right, for sure. I mean, yeah.
And so, going back to 1959, the Soviets had a program called Luna 1. And Luna 1 was an unmanned satellite that they designed to literally crash into the moon and leave a coat of arms, a Soviet coat of arms on the moon. Like, yes, we got there first.
And did it happen? Luna 1.
They launched it and they shot it, but they missed the moon just by a smidge, like 4,000 miles.
I love how you're like a smidge. 4,000 miles.
It, went right on by. But it became trapped in the sun's orbit. And to this day, it orbits the sun like a little planet. So,
you can like see it in a telescope?
I doubt it.
How do they know this?
I don't know. I'm not an astrophysicist.
I'm not saying how do you know this? How do they know
I know
that?
this because the internet told me this.
Well, okay, but I mean, how do... This is amazing to me. They shoot... Okay, anyway. And 4,000 miles is a huge miss.
Well,
I mean, I guess maybe in outer space it's not, but...
In an infinite amount of space, 4,000 miles is pretty good, maybe.
Maybe. Okay.
But yeah, seems a little off to me.
I feel like I'm going to start making up stories about outer space because nobody can check the validity of it.
Well, maybe now it'd be a little...
Maybe it would be harder, I guess. Yeah, that's true.
So the question is, okay, well, can you slingshot... If you can slingshot this unmanned satellite into the sun's orbit, I mean, why couldn't you put a guy in there and slingshot him?
I mean, you could, but what would be the purpose?
Well, I'm just saying, maybe they really did have the tech.
And if it's in the sun's orbit, is it not going to melt? I mean, I don't know how close you need to be in the sun's orbit, but seriously.
Well, I mean, Pluto's in the sun's orbit.
Yeah, and it's probably really hot.
Pluto?
No, Pluto's the cold planet, isn't
It's
it?
not a planet anymore, but yeah.
Or the cold star or whatever.
It's just a little chunk of rock, ice, metal. Uranus is in the sun's orbit.
Okay, never mind. So I guess you don't have to be.
No, I mean,
Burning.
Mercury would be hot.
Okay. I can't even
But the
pretend.
ones that are out there, I think, are pretty cold.
Got it.
The other thing that made it tricky, though, is there are real cosmonaut casualties that were hidden from the public that have actually been verified since the fall of the Soviet Union. So that does add some validity to...
Do the names confirm? Like, I mean, do the names match what these brothers have said they heard? Or maybe they don't even have names.
They don't have names on
so,
their things.
Yeah.
Um,
This is strange. I mean,
it is strange. So there was a poor guy, 24-year-old Valentin Bondarenko. I know I butchered that, but that's okay. He was one of the 20 original Soviet cosmonauts. He was actually the youngest of them. And there was a lot of hype about these guys. They were in a lot of films and photos, kind of propaganda, hyping up the space program. 3 days before Yuri's historical flight into space, Valentin was practicing, and I don't really understand what he was practicing, but he was in a pressurized chamber with 50% oxygen.
okay.
Now, the Earth's atmosphere is about 21% oxygen. So about twice as much oxygen. And what do we know about oxygen? It's a great oxidizer, hence the name, and it helps things burn really well, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he's in there. It almost sounds like it's like a living quarters. Like, I don't think he was practicing like being a spaceship or flying. I think it was more like what happens to the body at this,
Like,
pressure.
could you
and
live
then-
in this
right.
capsule on a
Because he's in
uninhabited-
there with, he has a hot plate to make tea. He has, like,
Weird.
Yeah.
Why the 50% oxygen? I wonder.
I don't know either.
Okay, just
I'm sure it has something to do with what
something,
they're studying
okay.
or whatnot. But he has to change his clothes and then wipe himself down with alcohol. And so he does this with a cotton ball, throws it in the garbage,
It combusts.
missed the garbage, which is why you got to have a good jump shot.
Totally.
Hits the hot plate, catches on fire. He goes to try to put it out, catches his clothes on fire. But because the chamber's pressurized, it takes them like a half an hour to depressurize the chamber enough to open the door.
to get him out.
By the time they get in there, he's alive, but the very gruesome scene. Like, they kind of go into it a little bit. We don't need to talk about it here. Needless to say, he dies a few hours later.
Oh, that's terrible.
But they don't ever announce, like, they don't release this to the public. And this doesn't come out until the 1980s, early 90s.
that this happened to this
Right.
man. But the family of these
Well, even the
people-
Russian people realized, like, hey, wait a second, this guy was like on all the posters. Where'd he go all of a sudden? Like, why isn't this guy? Plus,
yeah.
he's the youngest one, super handsome, super young. And, so it kind of led to,
the people disbelieving him.
yeah, it's like, well,
Mhm.
I mean, could there be lost cosmonauts? Sure. Like, what happened to that guy?
Right.
Like, he was here a couple days ago, and now all of a sudden he's gone and no one's saying anything.
right.
So, again, it just kind of, like, this story goes back and forth constantly. Like, well, that wouldn't make sense. But then again, this happened. But then again, this happened. Like, it just kind of is this perpetual cycle of, But then again, maybe the story of him getting third-degree burns and dying was a cover-up. The fact that they shot him past the moon and he's in orbit around the sun somewhere.
Oh, stop. Just stop.
There have other sources have come out also, claiming that cosmonauts have been lost into deep space. In 1959, there was a high-ranking Czechoslovakian leader who claimed that there had been many unofficial space shots. One of which was, he actually gave a name, Alexei Ledovsky, as being fired off and launched on an R-5A rocket. And I really liked this story because the R-5A rocket, it was the Soviet Union's first nuclear capable rocket.
Nuclear capable rocket.
Right. So it's not like a spaceship rocket. Like it's a big rocket for shooting nukes. And I just love the idea. Like I can hear it in my mind where they're like, "Hey, guess what? Alexei, you're gonna go to space." Like, that's amazing. You guys built a spaceship? No. We're gonna strap you to a nuke, and we're gonna send you to outer space. Okay, it's not gonna have a nuclear warhead in it, but we're gonna strap you to the rocket and send you to space. That doesn't sound like a good idea at all.
I just can't imagine anyone being dumb enough to accept that. But maybe I just don't.
Maybe they didn't tell him. They're like, "Hey, we got a spaceship for you over here, buddy." They duct tape him to the rocket and fire off. So in theory, or purportedly by this Czechoslovakian guy.
Duct tape him. They literally put him inside of it at least.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, you're right. So you're sitting inside of a metal rocket and you get fired off into outer space. So purportedly, according to this Czechoslovakian official, he never came back. Which makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I just keep shaking my head at just even the thought of how you get a person to go in there and how the person maybe was deceived to get in there. But the whole process, I'm just like shaking my head at. Anyway.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So there have been a couple officially confirmed hoaxes on lost cosmonauts, but both of them were from 1968 and 1969, much closer to the moon landing and well after the purported recordings of these brothers and all these other things we've talked about. So it leaves one to wonder, I mean, I definitely would not put it past either one of these governments during the Cold War to have experimental things going on and firing. I mean, do I believe that someone got bounced off the atmosphere and is floating off forever into space? Probably not. But could you have failed launches and attempts that got covered up? Sure. I believe that totally on both sides of the aisle.
Right. Yeah. Bouncing off the atmosphere sounds very interesting. Yeah. I mean, all of it is strange. And then again, I don't know about space, but can these bodies sort of almost be frozen or preserved in time, So if you ever could find them, could they still literally just be almost obviously not alive, but you know what I'm saying? Like fossilized, but yeah. That's kind of what I'm wondering. Can the conditions be perfectly right up there that you could have a space mummy?
I sure hope so.
I mean,
that sounds really cool.
Anything's possible up there, is it not?
I'm not sure if it's Disneyland or, dreams where anything's possible. I'm pretty sure there's finite rules, but I don't know what they are. So space mummies might be right on par. I don't know.
Anyway, my brain goes in sort of all these weird places when it comes to outer space.
Yeah, I definitely don't understand it. It's really pretty. It seems really big. And there might be some lost cosmonauts up there.
Yeah. All right. Well,
so
I guess if you wanted to learn more and research more, you could kind of look it up, but it seems strange to me.
It is definitely strange. Well, everybody, that will wrap it up for tonight. Go ahead, like I said, give us a 5-star review if you liked it. Share it with your friends. And we will be back next week with some other kind of strange, bizarre, something or other about us weird humans. All right. Have a good night, everyone.